Hey everybody, it's Jenna. I'm here today to talk about something that has gone surprisingly viral in the past couple of days, the Entertainment Weekly cover story for the Fantastic Four First Steps. While I will forever mourn the fact that EW is now all digital and I can't own a nice physical copy of it, the article gave us some news stills for the film and a number of insightful quotes about how the movie is coming together. I could go on a whole separate tangent about Ebon Moss-Backrack crediting Jack Kirby with writing the character of Ben Grimm because God bless. Two particular quotes from it have gone viral for wildly different reasons, and I have to share my thoughts on them. The first concerns Vanessa Kirby Sue Storm, who is confirmed to be pregnant in the film's newest trailer, which screened at CinemaCon, and I am begging for Marvel to release sooner than later. The EW story confirms that, quote, Sue's pregnancy will play a significant part in the plot of First Steps, with Kirby revealing that, quote, director Matt Shakman and I were really aware that there hasn't really been a mother with a baby in these superhero archetypes women have been getting. One of the things I love most from Sue's history is when she becomes Malice and all of her dark stuff comes out. I was obsessed with that chapter of her life, so I wanted to make sure that there were tones of Malice in there with her, that she wasn't just the stereotype of the goody, sweet mother. She then added that, quote, I've always been really interested in the mess of femininity and how can you be both? How can you be all the things? Not just the tough, invincible, powerful woman, but also a mother who gives birth, which is itself a superhero act. I love that these characters are real humans in a messy family who argue and try to work it out and get things wrong. My tweet about Vanessa's comments and how much she fundamentally understands the character of Sue is still blowing up as I record this. And even though plenty of people seem to agree with me, there have also been people who view her comments as WandaVision erasure, which I think massively oversimplifies things. There's truth to her sentiment that, quote, a mother with a baby still isn't a very common superhero archetype, at least within the big two. Even though the history of superhero comics has been dotted with plenty of mothers, the arrival of their baby only gets to reshape the status quo for a little while, before being turned into plot fodder as quickly as possible. Once you notice it, it's kind of difficult to unsee. More often than not, the children are either collateral damage in a fight between their parent and a villain, thrown into some sort of narrative or literal limbo, or aged up through some sort of fantastical means. This has even been the case with the adopted kids of superhero mothers too. On screen, especially amid the superhero boom of the 21st century, the examples have become even further and fewer between. The Arrowverse had multiple instances of introducing babies and then immediately writing them out of the show unless they could return as aged up teenage versions of themselves and essentially become a full-time cast member. And in the MCU, the rare birth of a baby from a major character has usually been met with a time jump or some sort of twist that immediately leads to heartbreak. The crown jewel of this was WandaVision, which provided a nuanced and surprisingly comic-accurate take on Wanda Maximoff's weird history with motherhood. Even as the show raised the question of whether or not Wanda's family was technically real, it was clear that their impact was real to Wanda, to the point of her tearing apart the multiverse to try to get them back in Multiverse of Madness. Even then, the circumstances and the framing device of WandaVision the show took many of the same shortcuts as the comics often do. The sitcom framing device helped age up Billy and Tommy very quickly, skipping over most of the boring parts of their lives, as well as Wanda trying to juggle being a mother and also an active superhero. There's a sentiment in comics, often attributed to Stan Lee, even though there's no real clear record of him saying it, that superhero fans don't want actual change, they just want the illusion of change. This approach to superhero parentage of introducing the kid and then finding a way to speedrun their lives until they can become a young adult or adult superhero arguably falls under that umbrella. But it didn't for the Fantastic Four, and especially for Franklin Richards, who was born in 1968's Fantastic Four Annual Number 6 and proceeded to spend basically the next 5 decades being a young kid, not really aging into something resembling a young adult until 2009. Part of this was due to Marvel's nebulous sliding timescale, but nevertheless, it gave readers years upon years of stories of Sue and Reed juggling parentage with their roles as superheroes and public figures. Even when Franklin did fall into the tropes I mentioned earlier, briefly appearing as the teenage villain Psylord and going toe-to-toe with Sue's Malice persona, it was eventually retconned away into his normal status quo as a kid. There's no telling at this point what Sue's arc of motherhood is going to be like in First Steps, much less how the comic histories of Franklin and his younger sister Valeria will factor into that. But I do appreciate Vanessa's understanding of the emotion and the significance that motherhood will bring into Sue's life, especially when juxtaposed with everything else that's happening in the movie and in the next 2 Avengers movies. I also appreciate it because in the mainstream part of pop culture, Sue has always been underestimated as a pretty dainty, nearly flawless token girl of the team. This not only extended into the movies, but into the very, very early days of the comics, so much so that Fantastic Four number 11 had to build in a whole story directly addressing fan mail that called Sue useless. In reality, Sue has become one of the most nuanced heroines in Marvel's history, and it feels like we're finally getting that reflected on screen. On the topic of nuance, let's get to Joseph Quinn's quote. In the same interview, he shed a bit more light on his version of Johnny Storm, saying that the film will be taking a bit more of a nuanced approach to his hot-headed persona. Quote, he's a man that leads with a lot of bravado, which can be an affront sometimes, but also he's funny. Myself and Marvel Studios boss Kevin Feige were speaking about previous iterations of him and where we are culturally. He was branded as this womanizing, devil-may-care guy, but is that sexy these days? I don't think so. This version of Johnny is less callous with other people's feelings, and hopefully there's a self-awareness about what's driving that attention-seeking behavior. Matt Shakman added, quote, "He is really smart. He's on that spaceship for a reason, and I think sometimes people forget that in various comic stories, he's been one of the most heroic of them, even if he's undercutting his heroism at every turn through humor. He is Sue's brother, which means they are cut from similar cloth." This has been met with reactions ranging from, "Oh my god, he gets it," to, "Oh my god, they're making Johnny Storm woke." Again, this negative reaction feels like a massive oversimplification and to an extent of fundamental misunderstanding of Johnny's character. When the group first debuted in the 60s, Johnny and Marvel editorial itself definitely had fun with the fame and the attention of him being publicly seen as the team's heartthrob. There's somewhat of a running joke of him blowing off casual dates with girls to go on FF missions, something that not only fell in line with the Archie-esque humor of the era, but that further proved that Johnny's biggest priority was the team itself. In the ensuing decades, this evolved into love triangles and other relationship drama, in part because those sort of storylines had become commonplace around Johnny. In a similar vein, as great as Chris Evans' portrayal of Johnny is in the 2000s movies, it definitely was a snapshot of the prototypical 2000s ladies' man. From there, we got a sort of snake eating its own tail situation of the comics putting Johnny into messier scenarios, but in the process, fans kind of lost the actual reasoning of why Johnny gets into those scenarios to begin with. Even at his absolute messiest, Johnny is always searching for the kind of connection and love that his contemporaries already have. I highly recommend reading last year's Fantastic Four number 25, which captured that arc and that sentiment in the span of a single issue while giving him a very sweet alien girlfriend. While parts of Joseph's quote have been taken out of context or turned into a direct attack on Chris Evans, it really feels like he understands that emotional undercurrent behind Johnny's actions. It doesn't sound like Johnny absolutely won't be a flirt or a showboat in First Steps, but rather that we'll get a peek behind the curtain as to why he's acting that way. Both of these comments and the ensuing conversation around them further prove to me how meaningful a movie like First Steps is. While the Fantastic Four are some version of a household name, there are clearly so many details and nuances of them that audiences just aren't even aware of yet. The CW interview illustrated that, and I'm definitely hoping that the movie illustrates it as well. Are you excited for Fantastic Four First Steps? What do you think of this new EW interview? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you haven't already done so. Merch is available at the link in the description. As always, you can find me on social media at Hey It's Jenna Lynn. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, go read some comics.